All right, let's recap chapter 23. So in the last chapter, Cecile kind of makes a big change. She finds a stool for Delphine to sit on and she's cooking in the kitchen, and she lets her try her printing press out. Delphine is surprised by the stool, and she's grateful, but she's kind of nervous about using this printing press, and doesn't want Cecile to know how she's feeling, that she's nervous. What's important? What did we learn about the problem? Well, Cecile seems like she's kind of changing. She's letting Delphine into the kitchen, and she's kind of cautiously allowing her to try out the printing press. But in the end, she can only point out Delphine's flaw when her first attempt at the printing press doesn't come out perfectly. And I think this connects to the last couple chapters, because it seems like Cecile's letting Delphine into her world a little bit. But it's also coming after Delphine kind of let Cecile know how she feels about her. That she's comparing her to Vonetta. Like she thinks that she just wants to be a star, and that she's left her children behind without a care. But in the end of the chapter, it seems like she's not trying to be a mother to Delphine. She's not trying to encourage her when she doesn't make a perfect print. So it's like she's changing, but she's not changing into like a motherly figure, if that makes sense. All right. Let's remind ourselves of what our lens is for this read aloud. We got to be paying attention to the characters, major and minor characters, their traits, their relationships. We got to looking at the narrator's point of view. How does the narrator feel about different parts of the story? And we got to be looking for changes to any of the story elements, whether that's the characters, the plot, also known as the problem, the setting, or maybe there's a lesson that we sort of had an idea that a character was learning, but maybe it's changing. We also have to pay attention for and look out for any themes or lessons the characters are learning, or universal lessons. These are like big lessons, life lessons that the reader can take away. All right. San Francisco treat. Cecile didn't care where we went or what we did on Saturdays or Sundays, as long as we stayed far away from her peace and quiet. Our first weekend, we had played Go Fish and Tic-Tac-Toe in our room and waited for Cecile to announce that we were going to go some adventurous place that only existed in California. But the second weekend, I knew I had to have a plan. Since the sun rose high that Saturday, I figured it was a good day to go to the beach and collect seashells for souvenirs. Vanetta, Fern, and I had put on our bathing suits and sunglasses, and I'd asked Cecile to take us to the beach. I had never spoken Martian to someone, and hadn't had them give me a look that could only be what would be given to a Martian. So instead of answering our question, Cecile gave us a look that said, "Who are you, and what planet did y'all come from?" I ended up taking my sisters to the city pool, where we swam and splashed around without thinking about all the chlorine water knotting up our hair. So this is interesting. Cecile has no plans to take the girls anywhere, and it seems like she's surprised by their expectations to do something fun on this trip. And Delphine is kind of needing to plan everything. So that's kind of like she's a kid. Like Cecile is the kid, and Delphine is like the adult. It's really interesting. When we come back to her house smelling like chlorine, I'd asked Cecile if we could use her hot comb to press our hair, seeing how naughty it got. I'd expected she'd say no outright, because I'd smoke up her precious workplace with hair burning from the hot comb. In fact, I had expected a no followed by, "I didn't send y'all for y'all in the first place." It hadn't occurred to me that Cecile didn't even own a hot comb or a curling iron, even though the fact was as big and thick as her unpressed braids. She'd said, "Naughty? Your hair ain't naughty. It ain't misbehaving. It's doing what God meant it to do." That would have been news to Big Ma. We'd never entered the house of God without our hair pressed and smelling of Dixie Peach hair grease. So this is interesting. The girls are used to Big Ma wanting them to make their hair straight, and that's what you use a hot comb for, and hair grease for those of you that don't use those things to straighten your hair. But Cecile thinks that hair should be natural, should be curly. And this is, not only is this showing like the difference between Big Ma and Cecile, but it's also connecting to a change in Black culture around this time period. Folks have a lot of opinions about whether or not black folks should straighten their hair. Um, and it's a controversy that's kind of still going on today. And it sort of connects to some people thinking that, if you straighten your hair, it's like, maybe connecting you to what white folks think your hair ought to be doing. And so some people have a lot of opinions on that. And it's a controversy that continues even to today. A lot of people have some controversy around how black folks should be wearing their hair and how they should be whether or not they should be straightening their hair or not. For our third Saturday in Oakland, I had a better plan. I told my sisters we're going on an excursion. Miss Merriam-Webster would have been proud. Excursion. To Vanetta and Fern's uncomprehending faces, I said, we're taking a bus ride to our own adventure. It didn't make sense to fly 3,000 miles to the land of Mickey Mouse, movie stars, and all-year sun and not see anything but Black Panthers, police cars, and poor black people. I wasn't foolish enough to set out for Hollywood, Disneyland, or the beach, where they were filmed Happening 68 with rock and rollers like Paul Revere and the Raiders. Instead, I planned what we would spend our nearly last Saturday in California, traveling across the bay to San Francisco to a cable car to see Chinatown, Fisherman's Wharf, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Now that was an excursion worthy of a back-to-school essay. Even if we didn't have a camera to take pictures of us on our adventure, we would know we'd been there. I told my sisters, don't say a word. Just let me do all the talking. Even though I knew Cecile didn't care, I didn't want her to suddenly take an interest in us and ask a lot of questions. If she asked questions, I'd have to spin a lot of straw. And I couldn't spin a lot of straw and look her in the face the way I'd like to. Like I'm 11 going on 12, and I know what I'm doing. Cecile, we need money. I have all-day activities planned, and we have to eat while we're doing our activities. Yeah, I gotta eat. I turned to Fern. Don't say no more, Fern. She got it. If I pour cereal for them before we go, I said, we'll only need change for the bus, some lunch money, and a little extra if you want us to be gone long. Cecile almost raised an eyebrow, but not quite. She figured we were up to something, but probably didn't want to know the details. She reached into her man's pants and poured out a lot of nickels, dimes, pennies, and some quarters into my hands. I needed both hands to get every coin. She dealt out 11 single dollars from a wad of bills and gave me those. I was so giddy about having all that money, I just dumped it on my shoulder bag. I could sort it out later. Just for the weight of the silver and copper, I knew we had more than $15 I'd counted on us getting. I ate my cereal and washed the dishes with my shoulder bag slung around my neck, Brooklyn style. The best way to lose your money is to hold your bag off your shoulder. But this way, with the bag slung crosswise, you were ready for anything. As we were walking out the door, excited about our excursion, Cecile called out, I'm not coming down to no police station if you're out there stealing. Y'all have to spend the night in jail. That was as good as a be safe and have a good time as we were going to get from Cecile. We took it and left. Ooh, so Delphine's planning this trip from Oakland to San Francisco. And it's kind of like going from Brooklyn to Manhattan. San Francisco is kind of across the water, across the bay from Oakland. So kind of like Brooklyn is across the river from Manhattan. And it's probably about the same distance. If you were to go by bus, it probably takes you to go from Brooklyn to Manhattan about 45 minutes. Same thing. If you go from Oakland to downtown San Francisco, it probably takes you about 45 minutes. And Cecile, so she gives them money and tells them to be on their way. And kind of in her own way, tells them to be careful and have fun. So outside, the yards and streets were filled with screaming kids playing. It was all I could do to keep Vonetta and Fern in line for my fully planned excursion. I had worked too hard writing everything down to have them not want to go. I had asked Sister Pat about the bus and cable car. I had got all the sightseeing information from the library. I wasn't about to let a kickball game and some Barbie tea parties throw mile-long pouts on Vonetta and Fern because they want to stay here in black, poor Oakland. Then the worst thing possible happened. Hirohito came rambling up to us in his homemade go-kart. He skidded to a stop using his high-top sneakers, right at Vonetta's feet. She squealed and laughed and said, "What you know, Hirohito?" That was some cute thing she and Janice Angton came up with. I was sick of hearing it. "Delphine, you want to watch me fly down the hill?" "No," I said, while my sisters screamed, "Yes!" I glanced at my Timex. Don't stand there watching Hirohito on his go-kart, it said. The East Bay bus leaves in 12 minutes. You don't have time for that. Vanetta and Fern folded their arms and wouldn't budge. They watched Hirohito do that run and flop onto the flying T and go bumpity-bump down the hill. When he neared the end of the hill, he dragged his sneakers like Fred Flintstone and came to a full stop. Then he jumped up and turned to us, waving. Vanetta and Fern waved back. Let's see him do it again, Vanetta said. It's a boy going down the hill, I said. We've seen it already. Let's go. I couldn't say it was thrilling how he jumped on the board thing and rolled down the hill, twisting the T left and right, and then swerving it around. I couldn't say how I admired him for not crying about his father being in prison and for trying to be a normal kid. If you wanted to call Hirohito Woods normal. I certainly didn't want Vanetta to get the wrong idea and think I was stuck on Hirohito as she and Janice were. Because I wasn't. He was just a boy, and I didn't want to miss the bus to our adventure. So the girls seem to have been made friends here in Oakland. It's almost like a home for them. And Fern and Vanetta, they don't really seem to want to leave the friends behind to go on this planned excursion of Delphine's. Our bus pushed out poor and black Oakland, where lines formed for free breakfast and men stood around because there were no jobs and too much liquor. We were glad to be going. Each of us looked out and off onto different directions, taking in all we could. Finally, we were on our way to an adventure. I watched Fern glued to the bus window and sing to herself. I wondered if she missed Miss Pattycake at all. How she loved Miss Pattycake's long before she could walk. She teethed on Miss Pattycake's arm and legs, ate her hair when she didn't know better, squeezed her, slept with her, fed her, and sang to her. 7 years of loving Miss Pattycake, and now not one mention of her. I can study every mood Fern makes and still not completely know her. There are just things I don't understand about her the way I understand Vanetta. After Miss Pattycake had been damaged and put away, I slept lightly, expecting Fern to awaken during the night, missing her true love. Not that I wanted Fern to be heartbroken. I didn't want her to love someone all her life and then not love or want them at all. Even if someone was a doll. That was no way to be. So this is a change here. Fern loved that doll, Miss Pattycake, right? From the very beginning, she held on to that doll. But now it seems like it's different. It seems like she doesn't really need her. And Delphine doesn't really quite know what's happening to Fern or how she can help her. But she really wants to, like a mother would, like a parent. I wanted to say something to Fern, but she cupped her hand to her mouth and squealed, and ooh, like she'd seen something bad, like a naked lady riding down the street. It was kind of an ooh squeal. What, Fern? Her eyes stayed big, her hand over her mouth. Vanetta and I kept going. What, Fern? What? What, Fern? She swallowed a gulp of air and uncupped her mouth. I saw something. And said it again, and had gone from agog to being pleased with herself. I saw something. She clapped with a beat. No matter what we asked, Fern shook her head no, clapped her hands, and sang her song. I saw something. Fern was pleased she had seen something. Vanetta was sure she hadn't seen a thing, and then I remembered. He had said, Delphine. Delphine, want to watch me fly down the hill? So I'm kind of wondering what's going on here with Hirohito Woods. Why is Hirohito Woods asking Delphine to pay attention to him? Wasn't just asking all the girls. He was singling out Delphine. All right. Make sure you summarize. So who was in this chapter and what new things did we learn about them? What seems important? What are you learning about the problem? And how does this chapter connect to what we read earlier? And then here's your question. So Fern doesn't seem to have the reaction that Delphine expects to the loss of Miss Pattycake, her doll. How might this be a sign that Fern is changing? Use 2 details from the text to support your response.